What's up, guys? Another pretty good day yesterday. 4-1. The NFL plays were 2-1, and then 3-1 for the week. If you bring in Detroit, who won the prior night, Washington was the only loser. I mean, that was a loser, but they got my hopes up late because they did actually have a chance to cover the 6.5 if Riverboat Ron did as his name would suggest and went for two, which was not out of the question. Like sometimes you see teams with nothing to lose, like Washington, go for two, just so if they do get the additional touchdown after that, they'll be playing to win the game instead of to tie it. So I thought he might do that on that touchdown that cut it to it cut it to 8, but they went for just kicking the extra point and it got blocked. So it's like, come on, Riverboat, like live up to your name, go for two, cover the spread, come on. So they wind up not covering by 2 points where they did have a chance to cover if Riverboat Ron Rivera did what he should have done there based on his track record. So that's unfortunate. The Houston Texans got there, and I think the Titans maybe pissed them off a little bit by wearing the Oilers uniforms, which was kind of like saying you guys are not the real Houston team, like we still are. Which I don't know, like, but does that piss off the people that live in Nashville because the Titans are the Nashville team now? So I don't know, but Houston was able to overcome the odds there, I guess, and get that win. Nice win, nice upset. And I thought that Davis Mills was going to be the quarterback. I don't know who started. I don't even know if maybe I'm just hallucinating or something, but I watched the end of that game and it was Case Keenum in there. And he didn't look that bad. He did have one like really good play near the end there. It was a huge play on that game-winning drive there. Case Keenum, baby, avoiding the pressure and making one huge throw there near the end to get that win. And unfortunately, Will Levis got injured right near the end there for the Titans, got sacked, and looked like it was like a pretty bad leg injury. You couldn't really see. They didn't show the replay because I guess it was that bad, but I went back and I watched just the play over again. You couldn't really even tell what happened because it was just a pile of bodies. Ooh, hot. But yeah, 4-1, and then the basketball plays. I think. Or wait, what was the other NFL play I got right? I don't even remember. I think it was some easy win, right? Oh yeah, the New Orleans Saints. Yeah, against the Giants, and I think Tommy DeVito got hurt in that game. The Giants did nothing offensively. That was an easy win. New Orleans Saints might make the playoffs out of that awful division. And then, yeah, basketball, the Seattle one against Washington, Seattle University, they covered, but they were winning by a lot. I mean, they were winning by double digits in the middle of that game. It looked like they were going to win the game outright, and they were still winning in the final minutes of that game. They blew whatever a small lead they had left at that point, went into overtime. Then they had another lead in overtime. They were winning by 5 in overtime with like a minute and a half left. They blew that, and it went into double overtime. And they wound up losing by 1 point. So they covered, but I mean, really, like if they had not covered, and lost by 5 or something in double OT, that would have been one of the most brutal losses you could have. But luckily they did cover. They should have hit on the money line, though. I had the money line sprinkled there. That should have happened, but it did not. Still decent win, though. They covered the spread, and then Portland Trailblazers covered the spread. Portland was way behind early, and they made a nice comeback and made it close in the fourth quarter, and they had chances to win that game as well, for sure, although that one was not one that you expect. At least with Seattle, they really shouldn't have blown it. They were winning by a lot in that game. Portland was way behind in their game, so it was just great that they came back and covered the spread there, but they had chances to win near the end. Either way, a spread cover is a spread cover. A win is a win versus the spread. So we'll take it. Let's move to today's card here. There is that NFL Monday night game where I talked about it in my NFL video there. Eagles, Seahawks. It's tough to read. The Eagles are now down from 4.5 to 3 with juice as the road favorite. 68% of the cash and 68% of the tickets, it looks like, on them right now. They're certainly the public road favorite, although the public road favorite Ravens did win and cover their game last night, although that game was closer than the final score would indicate. I would say statistically it was a lot closer, and Jacksonville was within 3 going into the fourth quarter in that game. I think Trevor Lawrence is still hurt, man. He had some throws that were not what you're used to seeing out of him. He was underthrowing guys a lot. Like, I don't think he's quite right. So I don't know about that situation. But tonight, I would lean to the Seahawks, as I said in my video. This is not a play for me, but I I lean basically by default to the anti-public home underdogs in these primetime games like this. The Eagles, they're coming off a big game, even though they lost it by a lot to the Dallas Cowboys. That's one of those like reality check games, and now you have to go up to a tough place to play in the Seahawks. It's not the best spot for the Eagles really there. And they might be sitting a little bit easier because Dallas got wrecked yesterday, which I told you I leaned to Buffalo in that one. I wish I bet it. I should have bet that one. That was I felt that was a really strong lean at the very least to Buffalo. I just couldn't quite do it because Buffalo was off a big game themselves against Kansas City. But yeah, so the Eagles, I don't know if they're going to be suffering a hangover from what I think is kind of a reality check. And maybe because Dallas lost, maybe like they might even like think, well, we're still going to win the division now because Dallas lost. I don't know about that. The Seahawks, I think they have more to play for here because they're still fighting to get into the playoffs, and they're at home here and getting points. So that is the way that I would look. When you have a team that you pretty much know you're going to get an effort out of, which would be the Seahawks here, I think that's the way to lean when they're getting points like that. And I think Geno Smith is going to be back for the Seahawks after he missed one game, although, yeah, that might make it like a reverse injured player theory situation, but the Seahawks didn't win in the game without him, so I think they're going to still be a motivated team here because they're trying to get into the playoffs. So that's the way I look at that. College football, there's one of these stupid bowl games, the famous Toastery Bowl. I do like Old Dominion as a side in this one, but the line's gotten way too out of control. It was not really one that I was going to bet, but Old Dominion has flipped from a 2.5-point dog. They were sitting at like a 3-point favorite for a while, and now they're up to a 5.5-point favorite with a lot of late money on them. It looks like 71% of the cash on them, but 57% of the tickets on Western Kentucky. You see like lots of line movement in bowl games like this. A lot of late movement coming in. You see a lot of lineup changes. Western Kentucky's starting quarterback is not going to play in this game. I don't know if he is transferring out or what, but he is out for this game. So that's one reason why the line is moving like this. But I do think Old Dominion has the more motivation here. Western Kentucky, they're a team that's in bowls like every year at this point. I think they've won 2 bowls in a row the last 2 years. This is kind of like ho-hum for them, I would say. Like, I don't think this game means as much to them as it means to Old Dominion. Western Kentucky, it's kind of just going through the motions because it seems like they're just always in some bowl that's at this level, one of the like crappier early bowls, really. Sometimes they're in like a slightly better bowl than this, I think I would say. Old Dominion had to win their last 2 games to even become bowl eligible, which kind of tells you that they're kind of motivated. Like when teams have to reel off a couple wins at the end of the season just to get into a bowl, that kind of tells you that they kind of want it. In a lot of cases, they played hard to get to that 6th win. Now they get the reward. They get to be in this bowl. For Old Dominion, they were in a bowl in 2021. That was the last bowl they were in, and they did not win it. I believe they lost to Marshall, I want to say, something like that. I don't even remember whatever bowl it was, but I believe that was only the 2nd bowl in program history. It was only the first bowl that they made, I believe, since, or maybe this is actually the first bowl they made since they switched conferences, because Old Dominion was in the Conference USA, and now they're in the Sun Belt, I think. I don't know what it is, something like that. I forget. I could look real quick, I guess, but they've switched conferences. So Old Dominion, they're in the Sun Belt. They were in the Conference USA at some point before that. Yeah, I believe they were in the USA in 2021 when they lost to Tulsa, in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. So this is a little bit of a bigger game than that. So for these players on Old Dominion, they haven't won a bowl before while they've been at the school, and some of them probably played in that bowl that they lost pretty badly in 2021. That was a little bit of a lesser bowl than this one, I guess, although maybe they're kind of like even bowls. I guess they're both those weird early season bowls. But Old Dominion, I believe, only has 1 bowl win in program history, which is back in 2016 against Eastern Michigan. And they were they moved up to FBS not too long before that, like maybe 1 or 2 years before that, something like that, because obviously they were bowl ineligible during like the transition period. But so I think this means more to Old Dominion because they're a program that I believe has only been to 2 bowls and they've only won 1, and it's been 7 years since the program has a bowl win. And these guys on their team have not experienced a bowl win before. So I think they're going to be motivated, whereas Western Kentucky, like I said, they have been in bowls. Some of these guys have been in multiple bowls. I think it means and won them. So I think it means less to them than it means to Old Dominion. The public just looks at the records here and says, oh, well, Western Kentucky has the better record. They're obviously the better team. If there wasn't like the motivational aspect of it and Western Kentucky's quarterback was actually playing, yeah, they'd be the better team, but that is not the case here. So these bowls, it's tricky, man. So yeah, Old Dominion, I think should probably win this game, but the line has gotten way out of hand at 5.5. I would not be laying 5.5. Like if you like Old Dominion, it would have been a lot better to lay like up to maybe like the 3 on them. So I'm not going to be on it, but that's the way I look at that. Moving to college basketball, I don't have anything on this either. I can tell you that Michigan State is certainly in a big letdown spot off of when I had them just 2 days ago on Saturday. They had a huge win over Baylor. They're sitting at a 15.5, now up to 16.5 with juice over Oakland of Michigan. So Michigan State, yeah, they're in a huge letdown off of the massive win over Baylor. I just tend to sometimes not like to get involved in games where it's like almost enough of a mismatch where it's almost like the better team can like dictate the score. So I think that's kind of the case here. And Michigan State is still like a little bit underrated, I would say, because I think they're like a team that's like borderline, like a top 25, like ranked team. KenPom has this one at 15, so kind of like right where the number is. Definitely a letdown for Michigan State. I would be more likely to be on it if Michigan State had a bigger game up next, but they don't. They have Stony Brook, which who cares really? Oakland, they are probably going to step it up for this game. I think this is a big game for Oakland, of course, because they're the little brother in the state of Michigan. So when you get to play one of the best teams in your state, you're going to step it up. So I think that is the case with Oakland. So I do lean to Oakland plus the points there in that college basketball game. And I sort of lean against Quinnipiac in the in this New England battle in college as well, but they're up from 4.5 to 5, and I think KenPom might have that game around 5 as well. But Quinnipiac is they just played a close game against Yale, which is kind of a step up game for them. That's actually really a big game for Quinnipiac because Quinnipiac is in Hamden, Connecticut, which is like right next to New Haven, Connecticut, which is where Yale is. So Yale is kind of like their like bigger brother, like in all of college basketball. Yale is like the bigger brother to Quinnipiac because they both are in like neighboring towns in Connecticut. So that is a big game for Quinnipiac that they're coming off of, and now they have to go play Holy Cross, who is not very good, and Holy Cross in Worcester, Mass. And I think that this line almost looks too easy to take Quinnipiac because they have the way better record. They're definitely the better team. I mean, they're favored on the road. Holy Cross has been pretty bad, but Quinnipiac, I think their record's a little bit misleading. I don't think they're as good as their record indicates. And KenPom has them as the 3rd luckiest team in the country right now. So that means they have been winning some close games and getting lucky. And like I said, they're off of that pretty big game against Yale. So I think they're in kind of a hangover spot where they came close to beating like their biggest, they're kind of like arch nemesis there. So I would look to Holy Cross in that one. And Holy Cross, I assume, is coming off some bad game because they never play a good game. But they're, still winless at home. And they played Boston College, which is an in-state bigger brother of theirs. And Boston College just wrecked them. Not surprising, really. But they lost by they lost by 31 points. So I would lean a Holy Cross in that one, but I just can't quite get there with it. The line movement looks like it's a little bit against it. I'm not going to be on the college basketball slate, but those are my feelings on those games, at least. Take it or leave it. I give you those leans there on those 2 games. Move to, what should we do? NBA? Yeah, why not? I looked at NBA first because it's a bigger slate. So let's move to the NBA, and then we'll finish with a lame NHL game. NBA, I got 2 plays here. It's kind of a bigger card. Let's move right to the plays that I got here because I don't know if I have that much to say about the rest of these NBA games here. I do think Cleveland is in a bad spot. They're down from 5 to 4.5 with juice. They got 74% of the tickets, but 97% of the cash. So looks like they do have the cash discrepancy. Cleveland, yeah, they're Houston is in a bad spot. I forget what I even thought when I saw this game. No, excuse me, Houston's in a bad spot, but it looks like the line is moving against Cleveland a little bit. So I just don't think I can get involved with this, but I think Houston is in a bad spot against Cleveland. Sorry, I forgot what I even thought about this. Houston is not in a good spot. They just played a pretty tough game against Milwaukee yesterday, where they were kind of in that game, and it was pretty close for most of it. A pretty good performance from Houston, and that ended their win streak as well. They had a 5-game win streak before that with a couple of good wins in there, and then some wins against not very good teams. But and now they're playing a back-to-back, a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, a fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities, and a fifth game in 8, although the first 2 of those were at home. But bad travel spot, bad rest spot for Houston, so that's why I'm against it there. And they're coming off a near miss against Milwaukee. But the reason I can't play it is because Cleveland is also in a slightly bad spot. So they are in kind of a bad spot, but not really that bad. So they returned home, which I thought the return home was a bad spot off of playing Boston twice, and they didn't suffer the letdown, and they beat Atlanta for the second time in like a month or so. So I thought that was a bad spot for Cleveland there, and they did not suffer the letdown there, or suffer the return home distraction spot. And now they're staying at home, and they get Houston. So yeah, I do think Cleveland is in the better spot here. Even though I think it's slightly bad because that like home distraction angle like might come into play. Like after you did not suffer it in game 1, you might suffer it in the next game. I don't know, but Houston is definitely in the worst spot there. Sorry, I misspoke about that. I forgot what I was seeing in some of these games. It's just overwhelming. It's too much going on there. So I lean to the Cavs in that one, although they're actually down to a 4-point favorite now with juice. So it looks like the line is moving against the Cavs for whatever reason. I lean to the Cavs on that one because I think it is a bad spot for Houston. But the actual plays I'm going to have, one of them, this one's going to be a little bit tough to swallow, and it's the Memphis Grizzlies against the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm on this one. It looks like the Thunder are up from 8 to 10.5. I don't know if there are injuries in play here. I haven't even really looked. Oklahoma City's at 96% of the cash, but 87% of the tickets. I don't know if that's quite right, but they're certainly going to be the public team. Like the Thunder have been playing really well. They have the much better record. Nobody's going to want anything to do with Memphis, even though they were a playoff team last year. They have not been playing well this year. They only have 6 wins on the season. I'm just trying to look up Grizzlies injuries real quick, even though I'm already on this game. I don't even know if it really matters that much. Let's see. It looks like Kennard is out. And Derrick Rose is out. It's kind of like, I don't know. So they got some injuries, and Marcus Smart is also out. Oh, boy. So Memphis does have some somewhat key injuries there, which I think is why the line has moved up. So they're kind of like a shell like team right now. But I think in some cases they're just going to be getting more value on Memphis because they have so many guys out. Like the line is going to move more against them than maybe it should. And they have had a couple days off as well. So did those guys even play in their last game? I'm looking right now to see what Memphis's lineup has. Derrick Rose played in their last game, but he only played 9 minutes. So he's like at the end of his career, man. I don't think he plays that much. And those other guys who were injured didn't play in that game either. So this is not the first game that they've been out. So I don't know. They might be like used to playing without these guys. So I don't know about that. Either way, though, I'm playing the spot here. This is a bad spot for the Thunder. So, I mean, if you're going to move the line up like 3 more points or whatever to give us some more value because of the Memphis injuries, I say go ahead, I guess. I think it's a bad spot for the Thunder. They're in a pretty prime letdown spot as they just beat the Denver Nuggets and they're returning home, even though it's only a 2-game road trip, which isn't like that crazy. But when you just beat Denver to finish the road trip and that means you're coming out of elevation as well. You beat the returning champs and you're coming out of their home, out of elevation, coming back home. And up next on Thursday, you got the Clippers, followed by the Lakers, then followed by Minnesota, and then the Knicks, and then Denver. You got a bunch of bigger teams up next. This is the down spot in the Thunder's schedule here. And I know I've lost going against the Thunder once or twice recently, but this is a bad spot for them, man. It's a letdown spot. It's a one spot, and they're returning home, so you might have those return home distractions as well, even though it's only from the 2-game road trip. Like I said, that didn't really take them far geographically, really, although they went out to the West Coast to start it and lost at Sacramento. But this is like one spot where they might overlook their opponent because it's surrounded by bigger opponents. The Clippers up next. Clippers are on a huge win streak, and they are starting to gel with James Harden there with that star lineup that they have there. Bad spot for Oklahoma City, without a doubt. So I'm taking the generous amount of points with Memphis at 10.5 or whatever it is. Memphis, they're on a loss streak. They just lost 2 games to Houston, a home and home. They played not terribly, really, in these recent games, but they're on a 4-game losing streak at this point, really. And now they have 2 days off after they lost at home in a 1-game homestand against Houston. Were not able to get revenge after losing to Houston in Houston the prior game. So now they have 2 days off and they get to go on the road. So I think that's actually helpful because it gets to like break that like losing momentum a little bit, and you get to like refocus and just focus on basketball, put those like home distractions aside. Starting a 2-game road trip here, I think you're going to be focused on an Oklahoma City team that's been playing pretty well. So I like Memphis there getting all those points, and it's one that's going to be difficult to take. It feels pretty difficult to take, and the public is certainly going to want nothing to do with it. So that's Memphis Grizzlies plus 10.5. The other game that I'm on here, another like night. This one's a nice like market read here, I would say, and I think the situation calls for it. Is the Utah Jazz as a nice anti-public home underdog here? The Nets are down from 4.5 to 4 on the road here at Utah. 76% of the tickets on the Nets, but 60% of the cash. So the cash discrepancy is on the side of the Jazz. The Nets are public. They're laying points on the road, and I think they're not in a good spot. So it all kind of lines up nicely for going against the Brooklyn Nets. What did the Nets do in their last game? We saw them. I mentioned it in my play against Golden State last night. 2 days ago, Brooklyn barely lost to Golden State. I think they made a big comeback against Golden State. They like really had to put in a max effort in the later portions of that game to come back from a huge deficit, and they had chances to win that game at the end there, and they almost beat the Warriors. And that was coming off a game against Denver as well, which was coming off a win at Phoenix. So they're coming off like a tough game against Golden State, which could put them in a hangover spot with only 1 day off, and then they have to go into elevation into Utah. That's a tough spot. Just alone, that makes it a tough spot. And then when they return home, though, they're going to have to face the New York Knicks, who are 1 game ahead of them in their division. And then they have Denver again after that. So those are bigger games than this Utah game. Utah hasn't been playing well, so nobody's really going to be paying that much attention to Utah. So this is a little bit of a sandwich because Brooklyn just had a really tough game against Golden State, and they have a division in-city rival, basically, against the Knicks coming up next. So I think that makes it a bit of a sandwich, and they're also playing with that Golden State game, they're playing a 3rd game in 4 days, all in different cities. They were playing, I believe, a 4th and 6 as well, all in different cities. And now they're playing a 5th game in 8, all in different cities. So that's a tough spot, man. They've only won 1 game on this road trip, so I think you could argue maybe they want to salvage this road trip, but they could also be running out of steam after such a max effort to make a comeback in that Golden State game. Now you have to go into elevation. It's not a good spot for Brooklyn, man. Playing a 5th straight game on the road in the last 8 days, even though you lost most of those games, you've been putting in some effort in these games. It's going to be tough for Brooklyn, and the public is not going to want anything to do with Utah because Utah sucks. Oh, reference to Celtic Pride, a movie that I'm actually an extra in as a child from back in the 90s. Utah sucks. Utah sucks. This is going to be more a situation where it's going to be one of the other quotes from that movie. Root for Utah, Utah. So let's do it. Let's root for Utah. And in Utah's situation, yeah, they're returning home from a road trip. They only have 1 day off, but it's only a 2-game road trip. It took them to the Pacific Coast, but it was only 2 games. They won at Portland, and then in their final game of the road trip, they lost badly to Sacramento. They lost by 21 points to Sacramento. That's not good. So, and this is the only game that they're playing at home here before they have to go back out on the road. So you could argue they're going to be facing like the return home distractions, maybe. But when you just lost by 21 points, I think you also might be like a little bit focused here. And I think Brooklyn is in the much worse spot here. In Utah, they're not exactly in a situation where they can really overlook anybody, sitting at a 9-17 record. I think they're going to probably want to show up here. So I like Utah. So those are the two NBA plays that I'm on. And then the NHL, I see another market read here that I'm going to be on, which is going to be on the Pittsburgh Penguins. And before I do that, I will say quickly that I think Winnipeg, I think, is kind of in a bad spot because they're coming off a big win over the Avalanche, which I actually think was yesterday as well. Was that yesterday? No, it was multiple days ago, I guess. So the Avalanche played again yesterday and beat San Jose, but Winnipeg's coming off a big upset, I think it was an upset. Yeah, probably, but I think the Avalanche were a small favorite there, and that was actually a bad spot for Winnipeg because they're returning home from a 4-game road trip, and they'd beaten the Avalanche on the road trip. They've now won 6 of their last 7. They're on like a nice tear right now, and they just beat the Avalanche. So I think they're in a bad spot because it is a letdown spot for Winnipeg after they just beat the Avs again. A huge win there in a spot where they could have been distracted on the return home. They get Montreal now, and they have Detroit and Boston up next too. So I think it's also a sandwich for Winnipeg. So I think it's a bad spot for Winnipeg. However, I'm not sure that Montreal is in the best spot either because they're coming off a pretty nice win themselves over the Islanders 2 days ago. But now they're starting a road trip. So you might argue that, well, Montreal, because they're starting a road trip, they probably will be focused on hockey here. Starting a road trip is usually a focus spot, although it's a little bit less good when you're coming off a nice win like they are against the Islanders. But I actually do like Montreal in that one. I'm just not quite sure I can get there with it, with the line being where it is. Winnipeg is down from -214 to -212. On the money line, they got 100% of the cash, according to KenPom, which I don't think that could possibly be right, and 82% of the tickets. Winnipeg, I think we just know they're certainly going to be the public team at the very least. So I like Montreal on that one. I lean to Montreal, but the play I'm actually on, as I said already, Pittsburgh Penguins. I like how the market is shaping up here with the tickets look like they're evenly split right now, 50% on both sides, but Pittsburgh with 97% of the cash right now. And they're still sitting at like -117 on the money line, it looks like. Although I think the best I could find was -118 on the Penguins. I like the Penguins in this one. I think they're being overlooked right now, even though they do have that nice name recognition. Minnesota Wild are off. They're in a tough scheduling spot, man. They're in a letdown spot. They just beat the Canucks in a shootout. That's a big win. The Canucks have been playing really good hockey this year. That's a huge win for Minnesota, I believe, against a Western Conference foe there. Like potential even like playoff previews type of stuff. If you think Minnesota's gonna turn it on and maybe become a playoff team like they were last year, they're at a 500 record right now, but they've reeled off 3 wins in a row. Although the Seattle one probably not that impressive. They returned home though, but they had multiple days off after returning home from a 4-game road trip. And they did not totally suffer the letdown or suffer the distraction spot there in the return home. And they beat Calgary, even though they had just beaten Calgary on the road as well. They beat Calgary at home in a spot where it looked like it could have been like road reversal revenge type of stuff for Calgary. And that went into a shootout. That was on the 14th. Then they won again in a shootout in a much bigger game against Vancouver, which was another reason I thought that Calgary spot was bad for Minnesota, because they had Vancouver looming on the horizon too, and they lost to Vancouver during that road trip as well. They got revenge on Vancouver. Huge win there. They beat Vancouver. Now they go and they start a road trip, yeah, but with only 1 day off, and you're coming off a huge win over Vancouver. You just won both games at home. I think starting a road trip in that case might be a little bit disruptive. It might disrupt your momentum. And you're in a letdown spot, and you're playing a Pittsburgh team that doesn't really have a good record. And up next tomorrow, you have the Boston Bruins, which is a much bigger game as well. One of the teams with one of the best records in hockey, and the Bruins. I think it's possible Minnesota gets caught here by Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, they're in a bounce back spot. nobody's really even going to want Pittsburgh here because of what they just did. They just lost 7-0 at Toronto. That's an embarrassing loss, man. Even though Toronto's pretty good, you lose 7-0 to anybody in hockey. That's a total embarrassment. You're going to want to refocus yourselves after this. They have a couple days off after this, so they might just be totally focused on this game against Minnesota, even though, yeah, they are returning home from a road trip. It was only a 2-game road trip that just took them to the Eastern Canada teams there in Montreal and Toronto. Didn't have a good road trip. And when it's a short road trip like that and you're coming off such a bad loss, I think it's a spot where Pittsburgh is actually in a situation where they could bounce back here. I think it's a much worse spot for Minnesota in the letdown spot. Pittsburgh, I think they're in the bounce back spot, like I said, and their schedule has been less packed than Minnesota's has in the recent going. Pittsburgh had a couple of days off before they played that Toronto game as well. So that game was a little bit isolated with a break before it, and they have only had 1 day off since that game, but still really bad, ugly loss there. So I like the Pittsburgh Penguins. So those plays today are the Pittsburgh Penguins. I believe I'm on minus 118 on that one. And then in the NBA, what did I say? I don't even remember what I said. Action Network's too slow right now. Memphis Grizzlies plus 10.5 and Utah Jazz plus 4. Let's get it, man. Let's do it. Let's continue the winning ways here. Hopefully you have a good Monday. Enjoy all these games and peace out. Have a good start to the week.